There are stories that begin with love, and others that begin with a lie. But what happens when both are the same story? In a world where wealth can buy almost everything, a powerful man decided to test the one thing money was never meant to control: the human heart. He thought he could measure sincerity, design affection, and choose who was worthy of love. So he built a trap disguised as a test and hired a stranger to play the perfect lie. Her name was Alejandra. She came to his hacienda as a maid, quiet, humble, invisible. But what he didn't know was that she would become the mirror he could no longer avoid. This is not just a story about deception. It's a story about power, pride, and the price of pretending to be someone you're not. Because sometimes the one you think you're testing is the one sent to teach you who you really are. If you believe love is something deeper than appearances, watch till the end. Because this time, the truth won't just hurt, it will heal. There's a certain kind of silence that only exists in old estates, the kind that makes you whisper, even when you're alone. The morning sun filtered through tall windows, painting the marble floor with gold. Dust hung in the light like small secrets waiting to be told. And in that stillness, a man's voice broke the air. "Remember," he said, calm but absolute, "you are only my employee. You don't speak unless it's necessary." Those words hung heavier than they sounded. They weren't instructions. They were boundaries. Jose Daniel, young and loyal, nodded without looking up. He held the umbrella just right, the way he'd been trained, but in his eyes there was a flicker of doubt, as if he knew that today wasn't like other days. Paul adjusted his cuffs, polished silver, catching the light. He looked every bit the master of the hacienda, composed, elegant, distant. Yet beneath that surface was a hint of nerves, something human struggling to stay hidden. "Sir," Jose asked quietly, "are you sure you want to do this?" Paul gave a small, measured smile. It's the only way to know someone's heart. A cryptic answer, but that's how he liked it. Half-truths wrapped in good manners. Outside, the distant hum of a car engine rolled closer. The guests were arriving. Jose straightened, lifted the umbrella higher. Paul exhaled, one hand brushing invisible lint from his jacket. "The umbrella," Paul murmured. "I don't want them to see me sweat." It was vanity, maybe. Or maybe it was armor. Through the grand iron gates came two women, one confident and radiant in white, the other quiet, almost cautious. Her gaze scanning the estate like she'd seen it before in a dream. Paul's voice lowered. "They've arrived." He straightened his tie, turned toward the entrance. "I'll receive them myself." Jose stepped aside, murmuring, "Yes, sir." And just like that, the quiet morning became theater. "Good morning, ladies," Paul greeted, voice smooth as glass. The taller woman extended her hand first. "I'm Damaris Roales." Her smile was polished, practiced. Behind her stood the second woman, Alejandra Jimenez, carrying herself with a grace that didn't need announcing. Paul took Damaris's hand first. "A pleasure to finally meet you, Miss Damaris." He gestured politely to Jose. "Take off the umbrella so she can see me." Jose obeyed. For a brief moment, sunlight hit Paul's face, revealing something fragile in his perfection. Damaris smiled wider. "The pleasure is mine, Mr. Paul." "And you," he turned to the quieter one, "must be Alejandra." "Yes," she said softly. "Nice to meet you." "The pleasure," Paul replied, "is entirely mine." There was a pause, small but noticeable. Paul's gaze lingered a second too long. Alejandra noticed. Damaris noticed too. "Are you going to take us or not?" Damaris said with a half laugh, half challenge. Paul gestured gracefully. "Of course. Please, come this way." The path leading into the hacienda was lined with stone arches and climbing vines. Every sound, the echo of footsteps, the rustle of leaves, felt amplified, as if the house itself was listening. Paul guided the women toward the courtyard, narrating fragments of history with effortless pride. This hacienda, he said, has been in my family for generations. Every wall has a story. Damaris nodded politely, though her eyes measured every inch. Alejandra said little, but her gaze caught everything: the uneven brick, the faint scent of jasmine, the way Jose lingered behind them, silent, dutiful. At the fountain, Paul paused. "Would you like a tour?" Damaris smiled. "If you'd be kind enough to give it yourself, we'd be delighted." "Of course," Paul replied. He turned slightly. "Jose, prepare the house for lunch." "Yes, sir." "And who is this?" Damaris asked, her tone more curiosity than kindness. Paul answered, "She's the maid." Alejandra nodded politely. "Nice to meet you." Paul continued, his tone distant. "I'll borrow her for a moment." Then, in that small exchange, a label, a title, a role, something invisible shifted. Inside, Jose waited for instructions. "You can stay with Jose Daniel," Paul said to Alejandra. "Help with lunch, if you wish." "Yes, sir, at your service." She turned to Jose with a faint, ironic smile. "Come on, let's not keep your kitchen waiting." "Of course," he said. "Come with me." As they walked away, Damaris leaned toward Paul and whispered, "Your employee seems a little rigid." Paul smiled faintly. "Only sometimes." "And your boss," she teased. "Is he as kind as they say?" Jose glanced back. "He's a good man, respectable." Alejandra scoffed lightly. "Respectable? I doubt that. A man who tries to buy affection isn't respectable." Jose frowned. "My boss doesn't buy affection. He just wants to fall in love." "By posting an ad to bring women here?" Alejandra asked. "You really think that's how you find love?" He didn't answer right away. "Maybe he just believes love deserves a chance." "And maybe," she said, eyes sharp but curious, "he should show who he really is instead of what he owns." Jose thought about that. "Then you think he's only interested in money?" "I don't know," Alejandra said, her voice softening. "But if he's searching for something real, he's looking in the wrong place." They reached the kitchen doorway. The smell of simmering stew filled the air. Outside, Paul's laughter echoed faintly, polite and measured. Alejandra glanced toward the sound. "Your boss," she murmured, "is either the loneliest man I've ever met or the most dangerous." Jose met her gaze. "Sometimes, those are the same thing." The camera of the story lingers there. Two people framed by sunlight and shadows, not yet realizing that both are trapped in someone else's experiment, one pretending to be less than she is, the other more. The test had already begun. None of them knew it yet. The kitchen of the hacienda was a world apart from the grand halls outside. It smelled of roasted corn, burning firewood, and quiet exhaustion. Pots shimmered on the old stove, and in every corner hung the memory of someone who had once worked here, laughed here, maybe even cried here. Alejandra stepped inside and felt it immediately. That strange blend of warmth and hierarchy. The cook didn't look up. The servants moved in silent rhythm, careful not to break the invisible rules that ruled the air. Jose Daniel, now without the umbrella and the stiffness that came with it, handed her an apron. "Here," he said gently. "You'll need this." She took it, hesitated, then smiled a little. "You're used to giving orders, aren't you?" He chuckled softly. "Only when the boss is watching." "Which one?" she asked, tying the apron behind her back. "You or him?" That question hung in the space between teasing and truth. Jose didn't answer. Outside, Paul and Damaris's laughter carried faintly through the open windows, a distant melody of formality and flirtation. Alejandra stirred a pot, pretending not to hear. "He laughs like someone who's trying too hard," she murmured. Jose looked up from chopping vegetables. "You really don't like him, do you?" "I don't know him," she said, "but I already know his type." "And what type is that?" "The kind of man who thinks love is something you can advertise." Jose put down the knife. His eyes, brown and patient, softened. "You think he's shallow?" She shrugged. He might be rich, maybe even generous, but generosity isn't love. He leaned against the counter, folding his arms. Maybe he's just looking in the only way he knows how. Alejandra glanced at him. And you, do you believe that's how love works? He smiled faintly. I believe that love doesn't always look right when it starts. Sometimes it grows in strange places. Her hands froze. Like in a kitchen. He looked at her longer than he should have. Maybe. For a moment, neither spoke. Only the soft hiss of boiling soup filled the silence. The spell broke when the cook entered, a stout woman with flour on her apron. You two can finish here. I need to check the bread. When she left, Jose's tone shifted. Want to see something? Alejandra frowned. Something like what? The hacienda, he said simply. That's a bad idea, she replied immediately. Your boss might get angry. My boss, too. He tilted his head. Since when do you obey people you don't respect? She smiled despite herself. You don't even know me. Not yet, he said, but I'd like to. They slipped out the back door quietly, shoes brushing over old cobblestones. The sunlight was sharper now, bouncing off the clay rooftops and distant fields. From the kitchen garden, Alejandra could see the estate stretching endlessly. Vineyards, stables, fences that looked more like borders between lives. It's beautiful, she admitted. Jose smiled. It's more than that. It's his whole world. Your boss's? Yes, he built most of it himself. Every corner means something to him. She raised an eyebrow. Then why does it feel so cold? He thought for a moment. Maybe because he built it for love, and love never came. That sentence lingered. It didn't feel like gossip. It felt like truth. They reached the courtyard where the fountain whispered stories to anyone who'd listen. Alejandra leaned over its edge, seeing her reflection ripple beside Jose's. Tell me something, she said quietly. Do you think a man like him can change? Jose didn't hesitate. I think anyone can, if someone gives them a reason. She turned to him. And what reason would that be? He looked away, toward the vineyards. Someone who sees past the walls. Her breath caught slightly. You mean someone like you? He laughed, shaking his head. No, someone like you. It was a compliment disguised as honesty, and it hit her harder than flattery ever could. They kept walking. At one point, she slipped on the uneven stones. Jose reached out instinctively, steadying her. Their hands met. Brief, unplanned, electric. Careful, he whispered. I'm fine, she said quickly, though her heart had skipped a beat. He let go slowly. You know, he said softly, you don't act like a maid. She looked at him, almost offended. And how do maids act? I don't know, he said, but not like they belong everywhere they walk. A tiny smile tugged at her lips. Maybe I just have good posture. Maybe, he said, or maybe you were never meant to serve anyone. That line hit deeper than either of them intended. They stopped near a shaded corridor, the air thick with jasmine and unspoken things. Alejandra crossed her arms. So, tell me, what do you think about your boss's little experiment? What do you mean? The whole find a woman worthy of the hacienda thing sounds like a fairy tale written by a control freak. Jose exhaled slowly. He believes in tradition, in testing people. And what does that prove? Maybe nothing, he admitted. But I think he wants someone who'll love him for more than his walls. And you? She asked quietly. What do you want? He hesitated, the answer forming before he could stop it. To be seen. Alejandra blinked. By him? He shook his head. By you. The world went still again. Only the wind moved. From somewhere inside, a bell rang. Lunch signal. Alejandra took a step back. We should go. Jose smiled, masking the pulse of what had just passed. There's time. You came all this way. You can't leave without a real walk. You're impossible, she said, but the smile betrayed her words. Maybe, he said, but it's a beautiful place to get lost. She followed him down the corridor. For a moment, it didn't matter who was rich, Who was hired? Who was pretending? The estate blurred around them. Two people walking the same path for completely different reasons, yet feeling the same pull. In the distance, faint music drifted from the main house, a waltz that no one was dancing to anymore. Maybe that's what drew them together. Two strangers who didn't belong to the music but still heard it, still moved toward it anyway. They stopped by the stables just as the horses stirred, golden dust swirling around their legs. Alejandra reached out to touch one, and Jose watched her hand with quiet wonder. "Don't they scare you?" he asked. "Not really," she said. "I'm more afraid of people than animals." He smiled. "Then maybe this place isn't so bad." She turned to him. "Maybe it's not." And for the first time that day, she laughed. Not politely, not out of habit, but freely. Jose joined her. It sounded like the first honest thing that had happened in the hacienda all morning. By the time Alejandra and Jose returned to the courtyard, the light had shifted. It was late afternoon now, that golden hour when everything looks softer, kinder, even the walls that once felt cold. Paul stood waiting near the veranda, hands behind his back, posture straight, every movement rehearsed to perfection. Damaris was beside him, smiling with the elegance of someone who knew she was being watched. "There you are," Paul said, his tone calm but edged with authority. "I was starting to think you'd gotten lost." Alejandra lowered her gaze. "We were in the garden, sir." "In the garden," he repeated, as if tasting the words. "I see. Well, since you're here, perhaps it's time we talk about something important." He gestured toward a long wooden bench beneath the bougainvillea. The air smelled of earth and faintly of citrus. The kind of scent that made you want to believe anything could grow there, even honesty. Paul sat down, resting his cane beside him. "You've seen my estate," he began. "The land, the workers, the animals, everything here represents effort and legacy." Damaris smiled like someone who'd been rehearsing this conversation for weeks. Paul's eyes drifted toward the horizon, where the vineyard stretched like green veins into the distance. "I've built this hacienda not just as a home," he said slowly, "but as a test of character." He turned to face them. "And now I'm looking for a woman worthy of all this." The silence that followed wasn't surprise. It was calculation. Damaris blinked once, smile unbroken. "Worthy?" she asked, voice sweet but sharp. "And what does worthy mean to you, Mr. Paul?" Paul folded his hands. "A woman who loves me for who I am, not for what I own. A woman who respects this house, this land, this work, one who will stand beside me for life. And yes," he hesitated, but only for effect, "who will give me a son." Damaris tilted her head slightly, considering the offer like a business deal. And what must this worthy woman do to earn such an honor? Paul smiled faintly. She must prove her love not by words, but by work. Alejandra, standing a few steps away, frowned. "Work?" "Yes," Paul said, his gaze shifting to her now. "This house was built by hands that understood labor. If someone wants to share my life, she should understand that too. My lady must not only enjoy the good, she must help me create it." Damaris laughed softly, though there was no warmth in it. "So you don't want a lady," she said. "You want a maid." Paul didn't flinch. "My lady will never be a maid, but she will never be afraid of one either." That answer landed somewhere between arrogance and conviction. Alejandra glanced at Jose, who stood silent, uncertain whether to look proud or embarrassed. Damaris crossed her legs, smiling tightly. "That's an unusual philosophy, Mr. Paul. Most men with your kind of fortune prefer women who are already comfortable." Paul nodded slowly. "Comfort is easy to buy. Loyalty is not." The courtyard grew quieter. Even the birds seemed to pause, as if the hacienda itself wanted to hear how this would end. Damaris broke the silence first. You're looking for a wife, Mr. Paul, not an employee. Paul's eyes narrowed slightly. Am I? Alejandra spoke before she could stop herself. Maybe you're just looking for control. Paul turned to her. And you are? She straightened. The maid, sir. A flicker of something crossed his face. Surprise, curiosity, maybe even respect. Then tell me, maid, he said quietly. What would you do differently? She hesitated, but only for a moment. If I wanted someone to love me, she said, I wouldn't make them prove it by serving me. I'd let them see who I really am, without the tests, without the walls. Paul smiled. It wasn't mockery. It was interest. And what makes you think I'm hiding behind walls? Because men who build fortresses usually have something to protect, she said. The moment stretched like glass, delicate, dangerous, beautiful. Jose shifted awkwardly, trying not to show how impressed he was. Damaris, on the other hand, looked as though she'd swallowed something bitter. Paul stood slowly. You're clever, he said to Alejandra, and brave. But love isn't about saying what sounds right. It's about doing what's hard. He stepped closer. You'll understand when you've built something of your own. Alejandra held his gaze. Maybe, but I already know that when someone loves you for real, you don't have to make them earn it. Paul's expression didn't change, but his silence said enough. Finally, he smiled. Perhaps you're right, or perhaps you just haven't met the right kind of man. She didn't answer. Damaris's voice cut in, smooth and practiced. Mr. Paul, I admire your principles, truly, but I believe a relationship should begin with mutual respect, not a job description. Paul nodded politely. And yet, Miss Damaris, some people talk about love while others prove it. I prefer the latter. He turned away, signaling the conversation was over. As they walked back toward the house, the air felt heavier, the kind of heaviness that follows pride and hidden attraction. Jose whispered to Alejandra, You shouldn't have challenged him like that. She glanced sideways. Why not? He challenged everyone else first. You don't know him, Jose said softly. He can be unpredictable. Maybe he needs someone who is too, she replied. He smiled despite himself. You sound like someone who doesn't plan on staying quiet for long. She shrugged. Depends on who's listening. Behind them, Paul stopped by the edge of the fountain, looking down at his own reflection. The water shimmered with sunlight and dust, blurring his face until he barely recognized the man staring back. Worthy, he whispered to himself. That's what I asked for. But the echo that came back, soft and distorted, didn't sound like the word he'd said. It sounded like a question. Back inside, Damaris adjusted her hair in the mirror, forcing a smile. She's bold, she said to Paul, her voice syrup-sweet. You should be careful. A woman like that could embarrass you. Paul's gaze stayed on the window, where the maid walked side by side with his employee. Maybe, he said quietly, or maybe she's exactly what I need. Damaris's smile faltered. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain, and somewhere deep in the heart of the estate, the line between servant and lady had already begun to blur. The sun had begun its slow descent behind the hacienda, spreading long, honey-colored shadows across the fields. The afternoon heat softened, replaced by the hum of cicadas and the faint rustle of palm leaves brushing against the walls. Alejandra and Jose walked side by side along a dirt path that led away from the polished gardens, away from Paul's voice and Damaris's laughter. Out here, the estate looked different, less glamorous, more alive. The land smelled of grass, dust, and something pure that didn't care about money or inheritance. Jose walked ahead, hands tucked in his pockets, quiet for once. He stopped beside a wooden fence that stretched toward the horizon. We're almost there, he said. Where? She asked. He didn't answer. He just gestured for her to follow. They turned a corner and suddenly Alejandra froze. In the clearing ahead were two enormous birds, tall and awkward, their long necks swaying as they walked. Their feathers shimmered in the sunlight, half gray, half gold. "What are they?" she whispered. Jose grinned. "Ostriches." "Ostriches," she repeated, astonished. "Here, in a hacienda?" He nodded. "We rescued them from a traveling circus last year. They were kept in cages so small they could barely move." Alejandra's eyes softened. The creatures blinked at her, curious but calm. One of them lowered its head, its feathers fluttering in the breeze. She stepped closer to the fence. "They're beautiful," she murmured. "They are," Jose said quietly. "They were terrified when they first arrived, but we take care of them until we can find a place where they can be free again." She turned to him. "And your boss allows that?" He nodded. "He paid for everything, the vet, the food, even the transport." Alejandra blinked. "He did?" "Yeah, he may seem strict, but he has a soft heart when no one's looking." She looked back at the ostriches, who were now pecking gently at the grass. For the first time, she felt something unexpected. Doubt. Doubt about her own assumptions. "I judged him wrong," she said quietly. Jose smiled, not with triumph, but with understanding. "Maybe." The breeze shifted, and the distant sound of running water drifted through the air. For a long moment, they just stood there, saying nothing, watching the birds move gracefully in their small patch of freedom. "Can I ask you something?" Alejandra said after a while. Jose nodded. "Of course. How did you end up working here?" He hesitated, kicking at the dirt. "It's a long story. I have time," he smiled. "Well, I didn't start here as a servant. I was studying agriculture. I wanted to learn how to grow things, how to make something survive. Paul took me in after my father passed away. He gave me a job when I had nowhere to go." "That's kind of him," she said softly. He nodded. "He can be demanding, yes, but he's fair. That's why I respect him." Alejandra looked away. "And that's why you defend him so much." "Maybe," Jose admitted, "but I've seen things you haven't. He's not perfect, but he's not heartless either." She crossed her arms, looking at the birds again. "And Damaris? What's her story?" He hesitated, then exhaled. "Promise me you won't repeat this." Alejandra raised an eyebrow. "Depends on what it is." He grinned. "She hired you to surprise him, didn't she?" Her eyes widened. "How did you—" "I overheard things. Let's just say curiosity is part of my job description." She sighed, shaking her head. "Fine, yes, she hired me. She wanted to make him jealous, to test his reaction. She's obsessed with the idea of marrying him. And you agreed?" She looked at him sharply. "I needed the money." "Fair enough." He smiled. "But tell me, after today, do you still think he's the kind of man she deserves?" Alejandra hesitated. "I don't know. Maybe no one deserves to be treated like a prize." He nodded slowly. "Then maybe he needs someone who doesn't see him that way." Their eyes met. Something unspoken sparked, the kind of connection that doesn't need permission to exist. Jose leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You know what I think?" "What?" she asked cautiously. "I think you came here for one reason, and you'll leave with another." She frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "That sometimes life sends us to the wrong places just to meet the right people." Her breath caught slightly. "You're very poetic for a farmhand." He laughed. "Don't tell anyone. I'll lose my reputation." She laughed too, shaking her head. The tension between them turned soft, not romantic yet, but charged with curiosity. Then he said something that caught her completely off guard. "If I didn't know better, I'd think you were the one being tested." She blinked. "What do you mean?" "Everyone here is being tested in one way or another," he said, smiling faintly. "Even me." "And who's testing you?" He thought about it. "Maybe life. Maybe you." That made her laugh again, the kind of laugh that escapes before you can stop it. As they walked back toward the main house, Jose stopped suddenly. "Wait." She turned, confused. "What is it?" He looked at her for a moment, the way someone looks when they're trying to memorize a face. Then he stepped closer, just enough to cross the invisible line between curiosity and confession. "What are you doing?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Something I probably shouldn't." And before she could respond, he kissed her. It wasn't planned, it wasn't long, but it was real. The kind of kiss that silences everything else. When he pulled away, her eyes were wide. "That was—" "Sorry," he interrupted, nervous. "I couldn't help it." Alejandra blinked, caught between shock and something warmer. "You're insane." "Maybe," he said with a crooked smile. "But if you didn't like it, you can give it back." She laughed, shaking her head. "You're impossible." Jose looked at her seriously now. "No," he said softly, "just honest." The sound of footsteps interrupted them, distant, approaching. They both turned, realizing how far they'd wandered. The hacienda loomed ahead, its white walls glowing in the dusk. They started walking back, slower this time. Alejandra glanced sideways at him. "You're risking your job, you know." He smiled. "Some things are worth risking." "And what exactly are those things?" He stopped for a moment, meeting her gaze. "The truth." They walked the rest of the way in silence. The sun dipped lower, the ostriches resting quietly in their pen, two survivors learning to trust again. Alejandra glanced back one last time, and for reasons she couldn't explain, she smiled, because somewhere between duty and deceit, she had just witnessed mercy, and it changed everything she thought she knew about this house, and maybe about herself. By the time Alejandra and Jose reached the courtyard again, the light had shifted to that still, breathless glow just before noon. From the veranda, Paul's voice echoed, calm, commanding, unmistakable. He was standing near the main table, dressed impeccably, a linen napkin folded over his arm like a symbol of control. Damaris was beside him, her smile thin and practiced, like a mask that had begun to crack. "Jose Daniel," Paul called out, his tone polite but heavy with expectation. "Where have you been?" Jose froze. For the first time since the morning, he looked genuinely uncertain. He began, glancing quickly at Alejandra, who stood a few steps behind. "I was showing Miss Alejandra the grounds, sir." Paul's expression didn't change. Not anger yet, just the kind of disappointment that hurts worse. "The grounds," he repeated. "And who gave you permission to do that?" Jose's lips parted, but no words came. "It was my idea," Alejandra said quickly. The air tightened like a drawn bowstring. Paul turned his gaze to her. Not harsh, but piercing. "Your idea?" "Yes, sir," she said, standing taller now. "I insisted. Please don't blame him." Damaris's voice sliced through the silence. How charming. The help taking initiative. Paul didn't look at her. "Miss Alejandra," he said slowly, "when has an employee ever toured the hacienda as a guest?" "It won't happen again," she said. He studied her face. Something in his eyes shifted. Confusion, maybe admiration. Then he simply nodded. "Let's hope not." The tension hung there, quiet and visible, like a thread no one dared to cut. "Go prepare the table," Paul said finally. "We'll be dining shortly." Jose bowed his head. "Yes, sir." Alejandra hesitated, but he gave her a look that said, "Don't push it." They both walked away, the sound of their steps echoing across the stone floor. Inside the kitchen, Jose placed the silverware with mechanical precision. "I told you it was a bad idea," he murmured. Alejandra helped him straighten a napkin. "I wasn't going to let you take the blame for something I asked for." He shook his head, frustrated. "You don't understand. He doesn't like being challenged, especially not by guests or employees." "Well," she said, voice steady, "maybe someone needs to." He stopped, staring at her. "You're not afraid of him, are you?" Alejandra smiled faintly. "I've met scarier men than your boss." Jose couldn't help it. He laughed under his breath. "You're going to get yourself fired." "Maybe," she said. but at least I'll do it for something that matters." He looked at her a moment longer, realizing there was something about her that didn't fit into any category. Not quite servant, not quite guest, not quite anything he could safely define. When the meal was finally served, the dining room looked like a painting. Silver plates glinting in the light, crystal glasses lined up like soldiers. Paul sat at the head of the table, Damaris to his right. Across from them, 2 empty chairs waited, a silent invitation. Jose and Alejandra entered together. Jose carried a tray. Alejandra followed with the confidence of someone who didn't quite know her place, but refused to be ashamed of it. Paul looked up. "Miss Alejandra," he said evenly, "would you like to join us?" She blinked. "Join you?" "Yes," he said. "I'd like you to meet my employees. I want you to see how I run things here." Damaris's fork paused midair. "Is that really necessary?" Paul smiled, faint. "Trust requires familiarity, doesn't it?" Alejandra hesitated. "Sir, I don't want to bother anyone." "Nonsense," Paul said. "Have a seat." Jose stood frozen, tray in hand. "Sir, with respect, employees don't eat at the owner's table." Paul gestured dismissively. "Then maybe they should." Damaris leaned closer to him, her voice low but sharp. "You're being too generous, Paul. One day your kindness will bite you." He ignored her. "Sit," he said again. Alejandra's eyes met Jose's. In that instant, she understood. If she sat, he'd get in trouble. If she refused, she'd insult the man she was trying to understand. So she did the only thing that made sense. "Thank you," she said softly. "But I'll eat somewhere else." She turned toward Jose. "I'll join you instead." Damaris's smirk froze. Paul's hand tightened around his glass, but neither of them said a word. Outside, in the workers' courtyard, Alejandra and Jose ate under the shade of a fig tree. The food wasn't fancy, just stew and bread, but it tasted better than anything she'd had at that polished table. Jose looked down at his bowl. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to," she said. "Still," he murmured, "no one's ever turned down his table before." She smiled faintly. "Maybe someone should have." He chuckled quietly. "You're brave," she shrugged. "Or stupid." "Both," he said. "And maybe that's why I like you." She looked up, caught off guard. "You like me." He smiled. "Isn't it obvious?" Her cheeks warmed, but she looked away, pretending not to hear. They ate in silence for a moment. The sound of the wind mixed with laughter from the kitchen, and somewhere in the distance, a horse neighed. Alejandra finally spoke. "You know what's strange?" "What?" "I thought coming here would be easy. Pretend to be someone else, get paid, leave. But now—" She paused, trying to find the right words. "Now it feels like I'm the one being watched." Jose's expression softened. "Maybe you are." She frowned. "By who?" He leaned in slightly. "By the house. This place. It sees everything." She laughed. "You sound like a ghost story." He grinned. "Maybe it's both." Back inside, Damaris sipped her wine, pretending not to care. "You see?" she whispered to Paul. "That's what happens when you're too kind. They start believing they belong." Paul didn't answer. His gaze drifted to the open window, where 2 silhouettes sat under the fig tree, laughing quietly. For a man who claimed to value discipline, he looked almost thoughtful. Damaris continued, her tone dripping with superiority. "Mark my words, Paul. One day that girl will make you regret your generosity." He finally looked at her, eyes distant. "Or she might teach me something I've forgotten." "Forgotten?" He stood, setting his napkin down. "That sometimes the best leaders are the ones who remember what hunger feels like." He left before she could respond. Outside, Jose and Alejandra finished their meal. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For covering me earlier." He smiled. "I wasn't going to let you get fired because of me." She looked at him, really looked, and saw something rare. Loyalty without agenda, kindness without motive. And maybe, for the first time since she'd arrived, Alejandra realized that in this strange house of pride and power, the only real act of rebellion was compassion. The next afternoon unfolded slower than usual. The sky above the hacienda shimmered in that lazy, golden stillness that makes you want to pause everything: work, words, even time itself. The dining table had long been cleared, the guests had retreated for shade, and somewhere between the kitchen and the terrace, Alejandra found herself again beside José Daniel. Only this time, there was no command, no instruction, no need to pretend. Just quiet and curiosity. They sat under the fig tree, the same one where they had shared lunch the day before. The breeze smelled of citrus and baked earth, carrying the faint laughter of the kitchen staff and the distant neigh of horses. José was polishing a silver tray, pretending to be busy. Alejandra watched him, her chin resting on her hand. "You're very serious about your chores," she said teasingly. He grinned without looking up. "It's easier to stay busy than to think too much." "And what do you think about?" He hesitated. "About people who shouldn't be here but somehow make the place better." She tilted her head, amused. "Are you flirting with me, José Daniel?" He looked up, finally meeting her gaze. "Would it work if I said yes?" She smiled. "Maybe." A silence followed. Not awkward, just warm, suspended between two people who were learning to listen beyond words. Alejandra picked up an apple from the tray, took a bite, and leaned back. "So tell me, how many women have you used that line on?" "Only one," he said. "And does she usually roll her eyes like I just did?" He laughed. "No, usually she pretends not to hear me." "Smart woman," Alejandra replied. "Maybe too smart for her own good," he said softly. The conversation drifted like the wind, sometimes light, sometimes thoughtful. She asked him about his work. He asked her about her dreams. She told him she used to translate books, mostly romance novels, before she lost that job. He told her he'd always wanted to write one, but didn't know how to spell half the words. "Maybe I could help," she offered playfully. "You write, I fix." He smiled. "You and I, the perfect team." "I wouldn't go that far. Then at least a decent chapter," he said. She laughed, and it was the kind of laugh that made everything else, the lies, the tests, the pretense, momentarily disappear. "So," José asked after a while, "if you're a translator, then teach me something." "Like what?" He thought for a second. "Something useful." "Useful?" He nodded. "Say, for example, I meet a beautiful woman who doesn't speak my language. How do I tell her she's beautiful?" She smirked. "That's easy. You say, 'You are beautiful.'" He repeated it carefully, his accent rolling over the words. "You are beautiful." "Not bad," she said. He leaned closer. "And how do I tell her she's different?" "Different?" "Yes, not like the others." She thought for a moment. "You could say, 'You stand out.'" He whispered it back like it meant more than it should. "You stand out." The air seemed to thicken around them. "And how do I say," he continued, "I want to see you again?" She tried to hide a smile. "You say, 'I want to see you again.' Simple." He grinned. "Simple, yes, but dangerous." "Why dangerous?" "Because sometimes once isn't enough." Alejandra looked away, pretending to adjust her hair. "You're learning fast. I have a good teacher." "Or maybe," she said, "you're just a good liar." He raised an eyebrow. "Do I look like one?" She studied him, slowly, deliberately. "No," she said finally. "That's the problem." The moment hung in the space between a question and an answer. José broke it with a smile. "Then maybe you can teach me another phrase." "Which one?" He hesitated, then asked, "How do I say, 'Do you want to hang out sometime?'" She laughed. "You say exactly that. 'Do you want to hang out sometime?'" He repeated it, each word slow, careful, deliberate. "Do you want to hang out sometime?" She nodded. "Good. Now you just need someone to say it to." He leaned in slightly. "I just did." Her heart stuttered in her chest. "Oh." she said softly. And what if she says no? Then I'll ask again, he said simply. For a moment, she didn't know what to say. The air felt heavier, almost fragile. Finally, she smiled faintly. Maybe. He tilted his head. Maybe? Yes, she said, but I want to see how far you're willing to go first. He laughed. Is that a challenge? It's a test, she said, echoing the word she'd heard Paul use earlier. Then I hope I pass. That depends on what you do next. He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. And what should I do next? She met his eyes. Surprise me. But before he could answer, the sound of footsteps echoed through the courtyard, firm, rhythmic, and all too familiar. Paul's voice called from a distance, calm and unhurried. Jose Daniel. Jose straightened instantly, mask returning. Yes, sir. Alejandra glanced toward the sound. You should go, she said softly. He hesitated. Will I see you later? Maybe, she replied, her tone teasing again. Then I'll take that as a yes. She laughed quietly. You take everything as a yes. He smiled, stepping backward. Only when it feels like one. As he disappeared through the archway, Alejandra stayed behind, her hands resting on the edge of the table. For a long while, she just stood there, thinking about the absurdity of it all, pretending to be a maid, working for a woman she didn't respect, falling for a man she wasn't supposed to notice. She picked up one of the old English books from the shelf, one of the novels she'd helped translate years ago. The title on the cover read, The Language of Love. She smiled, shaking her head. Maybe translation isn't about words, she whispered. Maybe it's about understanding what someone means when they can't say it. And somewhere deep inside the hacienda, the echoes of laughter, Paul's, Damaris's, Jose's, blended into something else, something like fate quietly rearranging itself. The test was still running, but Alejandra was no longer sure who was testing whom. The next day, the sun burned over the estate like a secret about to surface. Paul's voice carried across the terrace. Invite them both. Let's end this properly. Damaris arrived first, radiant as always, acting like nothing had happened. Alejandra followed behind, silent, eyes lowered, but inside her chest, her heart was pounding. Paul greeted them with a polite smile. Welcome. I thought a swim might help us forget yesterday's tension. Damaris gave a short laugh. How thoughtful of you. She dropped her bag and adjusted her sunglasses, already scanning for signs of attention. Jose was nearby, handing towels to the guests. He caught Alejandra's gaze just long enough to whisper, Be careful. Paul gestured toward the pool. Make yourselves at home. Jose, serve the drinks. Yes, sir. Damaris slipped off her sandals and sat by the edge, legs glimmering in the light. You know, Paul, she said, most men would apologize after making a woman wait. Paul smiled. I'm not most men. She laughed, but her eyes were sharp. Alejandra stood aside, unsure whether to sit, serve, or simply disappear. Paul turned toward her. You're not joining us? She shook her head. I didn't bring a swimsuit. He nodded to Jose. Give her one from the guest house. She froze. That's not necessary, sir. But Jose was already gone to fetch it. When he returned, he held out a folded towel and a simple white swimsuit. Their eyes met, one silent plea between them, don't get involved. Still, she took it and walked toward the dressing room. Minutes later, she stepped out again. The others turned to look. Even Damaris blinked in annoyance. Paul smiled faintly. Beautiful, he said. Now, will you join us? Alejandra hesitated, then sat by the pool's edge. The water sparkled. The world felt too still. Jose came closer and said quietly, You don't have to do this. She looked at him, a small defiant smile on her lips. Maybe I want to. He grinned nervously. Then at least promise you won't push me in. She raised an eyebrow. Why would I? Before she finished, Jose splashed her. Her gasp turned into laughter. Jose Daniel! He laughed too, splashing back. You started it. They were both laughing, unguarded, genuine. and that was the mistake. "Enough!" Damaris's voice sliced through the air. "What is this?" Paul stood slowly, his expression unreadable. "This is disgraceful," Damaris snapped. "Is this how you run your estate? Letting your workers behave like this?" Jose straightened. "It was just a game." "Ma'am, a game," she repeated. "With the help?" Alejandra spoke, calm but firm. "That's enough." Damaris turned on her. "You forget your place, girl. You're here because I hired you." Paul frowned. "You hired her?" Damaris froze. "Paul, listen." He stepped forward. "What are you talking about?" "I only wanted to help you find someone real," she stammered. "Someone who could prove—" "Prove what?" Alejandra cut in. "That love can be bought with humiliation?" The silence that followed was thick enough to drown in. Paul looked from one woman to the other, realization dawning. So this entire thing was a performance. Damaris lifted her chin. "You agreed to it." Paul's tone went cold. "And you turned it into a trap." Alejandra took a step back. "So that's what this was? A test?" Paul turned to her, voice low. "Yes, but not meant for you." She laughed bitterly. "Then who was it meant for?" "For her," he said, glancing at Damaris, "to see if her heart was real." "And what about me?" Alejandra demanded. "Was I just collateral damage?" Paul's voice softened. "No, you were the only one who told the truth." "That's not true," Damaris spat. "She played along too. Don't pretend she's innocent." Alejandra turned toward her, eyes steady. "I might have pretended to be a maid, but at least I didn't pretend to have a heart." Damaris stepped forward. "You ungrateful." "Enough," Paul said sharply. "We're done." Damaris glared. "You'll regret this, both of you." "Leave," Paul said. Her laugh was cold. "For her, she's nothing." Paul's eyes hardened. "She's the only honest person in this house." Damaris turned, snatched her bag, and stormed out. The echo of her heels faded into the distance. Alejandra looked at Paul. "So this was your test, and you failed it." He stepped closer. "You think I meant to hurt you?" She met his eyes. "No, I think you never meant to feel anything at all." He reached out, but she moved back. "Don't," she whispered. "Don't make this worse." "Alejandra." "Stop," she said. "You wanted to know who was worthy of your hacienda? Maybe start by being worthy of love." Jose stood silent, hands clenched at his sides. Paul lowered his gaze. "You're right," he said quietly, "and I don't deserve forgiveness." Alejandra turned to leave. "Good," she said, "because I'm not offering it." She walked toward the gate. Paul called out once more, voice almost breaking. "Alejandra, please, just one chance." She didn't stop. Jose looked after her, then back at his employer. "Sir, what now?" Paul exhaled, the sound empty. "Now?" He looked toward the still pool, reflecting the sky like glass. "Now I finally see myself." And for the first time, the man who built everything looked like someone who had nothing. The next morning, the hacienda woke to silence. No laughter, no footsteps, no music. Only the whisper of wind brushing the empty courtyard. Servants moved quietly, speaking in half sentences, avoiding the owner's eyes. Everyone knew what had happened by the pool. Everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. Paul stayed in his office until the sunlight turned orange. The house, once full of sound, now felt hollow, like it was holding its breath. He stood before the window, staring out at the land he'd built with pride, and walls so high even love couldn't climb them. He whispered to himself, maybe she was right. A knock at the door broke the quiet. "Sir?" Jose stepped in, hat in hand. His face looked older somehow, tired, disappointed. Paul didn't turn. "Say it, Jose." Jose hesitated. "Say what?" "Sir." "That I lost everything trying to prove I still had it." Jose said nothing. Finally, Paul faced him. His voice was calm, but there was no command left in it. "I thought I could test hearts the way I test my workers, but love doesn't follow orders." Jose nodded slowly. No, sir, it never did. Paul exhaled, the fight leaving his shoulders. Where is she? Gone, Jose said. She left before dawn, took nothing but her bag. Paul looked down. Of course she did. Miles away on the road out of town, Alejandra walked alone. Her shoes were dusty, her face pale from the sun, but her steps were steady. She had left behind the mansion, the lies, and every trace of who she pretended to be. What remained was simple: herself. At a small cafe near the bus station, she ordered coffee and sat by the window. The waitress smiled kindly. Rough morning? Alejandra smiled back. No, just an honest one. The woman laughed softly. Those are the hardest kind. Alejandra nodded. She looked out the window. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel trapped in anyone's story. She was finally writing her own. Back at the hacienda, Paul wandered the halls like a man seeing his home for the first time. The portraits looked colder, the marble floor too polished, the silence unbearable. He stopped in front of the chair where Alejandra once sat. The same chair she refused, choosing instead to eat outside with Jose under the fig tree. That memory hurt, because that was the moment he should have known. She was never impressed by what he owned, only by what he hid. He called out, Jose. Yes, sir. Get me paper and a pen. Hours later, Jose found the note folded neatly on the desk. It wasn't addressed formally. No titles, no apology, just her name, written plain, Alejandra. Jose carried it to town the next day and left it with the cafe owner. Give this to a woman with kind eyes, he said. She'll know it's hers. When Alejandra returned that evening, the envelope waited by her cup. She unfolded it slowly. The handwriting was unmistakable. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I wanted you to know. You were the only one who didn't want the estate, and yet you're the only one who truly belonged here. If you ever look back, I hope it's not with anger, but with the knowledge that you changed me. Paul. She read it twice, then smiled. Small, sad, but real. Days later, rumors reached town. Damaris had left the country. Paul had stopped hosting parties, and the grand hacienda, once known for pride, was now known for peace. The rescued ostriches still wandered the back field, and sometimes Jose swore he could hear laughter under the fig tree again. Not loud, just faint, like the echo of something that had been healed. Sometimes we build walls to protect our hearts, only to realize love never enters through the front gate. It walks in quietly, disguised as kindness, and leaves just as quietly when pride forgets its name. The screen fades to Alejandra standing by the road, hair caught in the wind. She folds the letter one last time, tucks it in her book, and walks forward. Not back toward the hacienda, but toward the horizon, where the next chapter waits, unwritten and completely hers. The mansion stood silent again. The walls that once echoed with pride now whispered only one thing: truth. He lost her, not because she lied, but because she refused to live inside someone else's illusion. And maybe that's the cost of being too good, too trusting, too human. When you build walls to protect your heart, you end up locking out the very person sent to heal it. Paul finally understood that love was never a test to be passed. It was a truth to be lived. And Alejandra? She never came back. But the letter she left behind still rests in his desk drawer, a quiet reminder that the purest hearts don't stay to be rewarded. They leave when they've taught their lesson. Sometimes, life sends us people who seem small, a worker, a stranger, a maid, but what they carry inside can humble the proud and awaken the blind. Because love doesn't ask to be tested, it asks to be trusted. If this story moved something in you, share it with someone who needs to remember that kindness still matters, that honesty still heals, and that no matter how high we build our walls, the right heart will always find its way in. She pretended to be an employee, but in truth she was the only one who knew how to love.